Oh, hiya! Just got back after picking up my exam certificate from my language teacher. It has been a bit unnerving going back into exams after adulting for so many years. But hey, look, I passed. For the past year or so, I've been going to Welsh and British Sign Language classes every week, and as of 2 weeks ago, I just started the next levels of those courses because it's mid-September and that's a time when a lot of language courses start, not only in schools and universities but also all sorts of language learning centres. I myself am pouring all of my only funds into... Only funds? That sounds wrong. I myself am pouring all of my funds into a Welsh advanced course and a level 2 British Sign Language course, and both have been thoroughly enjoyable. There's been a revolution in the online language learning space. Within this community, we've basically come to an agreement that classroom learning is out and comprehensible input is the future. Much of that is a result of the perceived failure of classroom teaching in schools, especially in the Anglophone world. And I like to call that into question, because for a very long time since I started teaching myself languages, I thought the same as well. I used to not care much about language classes. I thought I'm better off learning languages on my own than let a teacher dictate my progress and what I learn. I just thought that classroom teaching is best at explaining grammar, and for me, understanding grammar is the easiest part of learning any language, so I have little use for paying for them. So ever since I started my polyglot journey, subscribe to follow the journey, I've mostly been studying on my own and supplementing it occasionally with one-to-one lessons focused solely on output, speaking. But my more recent experiences learning lesser learnt languages, Welsh and BSL, have made me rethink my position on this. So welcome to Rapsolingo, my name is Israel, and this is a channel where I won't shut up about languages. And here are things to consider if you're thinking about taking a language class or self-studying. The first and kind of key thing to consider if you're thinking of studying alone is whether you have previous experience. Studying languages alone isn't easy, despite what people might say. Learning a new language is not just learning a bunch of knowledge. In order to use a language effectively, or install it in your head, you might say, you need a lot of understanding of the learning process that you can only get from having learned a different language or having someone guide you through it. I've seen lots of people learning their first language, or their first serious language anyway, and they get confused because they subconsciously assume that everything works like their native language, or everything works a certain way. And in language learning, my golden rule is to never assume anything. For example, someone might assume that because two concepts are the same word in their native language, they must be the same word in their target language, or even it's just the same concept. Or someone might expect a sentence to be structured a certain way. In my last video, I made a grammatical mistake in Welsh that I fixed in post. It turns out in Welsh, if you give two commands, for example, go to bed and sleep, you only conjugate the first one, so it literally translates to go to bed and sleeping. I didn't even consider that possibility. Each language has oddities like that a teacher would make you aware of. And then there are mental shifts that you need to make when you learn a new language. For instance, reading in a foreign language is overwhelming, especially if you don't remember how you learned to read in your own language, or just in general, because it's a lot of information hitting you at once and a lot of ambiguity that you have to get used to. Or when you're speaking, you need to get used to not having the perfect word all the time, either because you don't know it yet or it doesn't exist in the language, so you have to talk around it. A good teacher would make you aware of those issues and guide you through them. Or you can watch my channel and I'll explain it to you. This might vary from case to case, but in a lot of situations, you don't really get to choose your teacher. Maybe because it's assigned by the institution, or because your own availabilities only work with a certain class. And even if you do get the choice, it's really hard to get a useful impression of the teaching style and focus unless you've already taken a class with them. And I'm not talking about bad teachers here. I respect teachers for what they do and how they do it. I'm saying that every learner is different. They have different strengths and weaknesses, they have different goals and needs and learning methods, so it's basically impossible to have the perfect teacher for the entire class, no matter how you think about it. If you take individual lessons instead, for example on italki, use my link to get $10 for your lessons, you can often window shop teachers by taking one or more trial lessons. You're seldom required to commit, and even if you are, it's usually up to 1 month. But the classes I've come across so far work in longer time frames. When I did German, Italian and Spanish in my undergrad university, and also when I did BSL at my current university, I signed up for 1 semester at a time. Now, my Welsh and BSL classes are €1 a pop because group classes need more structure, and that's how the syllabus was designed. That's a big time and financial commitment. If the teacher you end up with happens to teach in a way that doesn't suit you for whatever reason, or in a worst case scenario, be a bad teacher,
the best you can do is quit and get a refund. In my case, I would have had to wait another year to try a different class, either because there aren't any spaces left in the other classes, or the other ones just don't work with my schedule. So hopefully your teacher will do a good job of guiding you through your journey, giving you ample opportunities to practice your various skills, and encouraging you to do your own self-study in addition, which, to be fair, tends to be less effective in a classroom setting than one-to-one tuition. That's why I've been teaching languages and coaching self-learners privately. But I digress. Another big plus of classroom teaching is the standardized, structured teaching, not only in terms of the types of classroom activities, but also the content covered. Don't know about you, but my usual self-study involves going through a self-study textbook until I get good A2, B1, and then go all in on comprehensible input. Obviously, the textbook is also a kind of structure, but there's only so much they can cover in one single textbook. Whereas in a class, they use books, handouts, and various classroom learning activities and materials that they know from experience will give you a comprehensive set of knowledge. This set of knowledge is also flexible because as you and your classmates ask questions in class, the teacher can tailor the content to your needs and interests, less so from one textbook. Besides, most of the time when I'm self-studying a language, I do it out of interest. So I choose content to consume that I'm interested in, and I get good at talking about things I like. But there are lots of situations where you want to be forced to consume content and talk about things that you're not interested in. For an exam, for example, whether it's a school exam, a language qualification, and so on. Studying a syllabus requires specific exam skills and perhaps areas of vocabulary, including ones that purely by chance you never come across in comprehensible input and output practice. You might say, if you're really good enough, you shouldn't need to learn the exam skills and vocabulary. And you might be right, but these kinds of training will give you an easier time in your exam. Besides, in some cases, these exam skills translate to useful real-life skills, such as getting the main point of a text quickly and accurately, breaking down the structure of a piece of communication, writing formal emails. Some are skills that you just wouldn't come across and learn by using the language naturally, especially when you're not living in the language, not from books, not from television. Those exam drills will give you the ease to use those skills in the future. Like now, I have no qualms writing formal emails in English to anyone. Another thing you might miss if you're self-studying is cultural concepts. While yes, you can probably pick up on cultural differences and nuances by consuming native speaker content, classes will give you that information explicitly so that you can quickly dispel any wrong assumptions you might have about the culture and build a strong foundation towards understanding and even assimilating into it. I said earlier that my biggest gripe with classroom learning is that it's best at teaching grammar. And even though my overall opinion on classroom teaching has changed over time, I still think that this particular caveat is true for the most part, at least until you get to a higher level where they focus solely on using the language, not teaching it. But even on the intermediate levels, it's not necessarily true. That often varies from course to course depending on the course design. For example, Samuel, my friend and co-host on our language podcast, listen to it here, is on a Scottish Gaelic course around a B1 level, while my B2 level Welsh course still has plenty of grammatical explanations and drills in it. His B1 course is basically structured around learning about various topics such as pets, travel, and religion through the medium of Gaelic. Classes can also differ a lot in terms of how much and what kinds of coursework there is, whether it's speaking, reading, listening, or writing, and so on. My Welsh textbook, for example, which is the official Learn Welsh series of textbooks because chat keeps asking about it on the streams, has a bunch of homework at the back, including grammar, reading, and writing. Though so far I haven't been assigned any yet. Some courses might have a heavier focus on reading and writing than speaking. For example, that's famously how Japanese people learn English. And even on the different BSL courses I've taken, where obviously there's no reading or writing, there's been different proportions of time dedicated to receptive, which is like listening, and productive, like speaking, practice. So if you want to get the most out of a class, you might think about what specifically you need someone else to train you in and what you can't practice on your own. And then the style of the class will certainly differ by level as well. In the lower levels, there's more actual teaching of the language, whereas higher levels build additional skills on top of the base language skills. What you get out of the class is no longer grammar or training your fluency, but rather just using it. My Welsh teachers keep saying there's going to be more and more speaking as we progress from foundation level to intermediate to advanced. I have a friend, shout out to Kirsten, who's been on higher level Welsh courses than me, and she says that at a certain point you're simply reading about things and discussing them using the target language. In more common languages such as English, the higher levels often come with more advanced vocabulary, like more descriptive words, as well as specific kinds of training in certain areas and skills such as business English, academic communication, and so on. In my undergrad degree, we had to go to a module called English for Arts, where they made suggestions on the style of writing that best fits our particular field and context. Whereas before that, in school, our English classes were mostly just exam skills. Even yourself, your personal learning needs are going to vary by your level. So what do you want to get out of a group class at the level that you're at? So let's say now you know exactly what you need. How would you know in advance what a course focuses on? It's pretty hard, but you can probably get a glimpse from the materials that are going to be used. I learned German in university, which of course is a much more mainstream language with a lot of textbooks to choose from. So before I signed up for the course, I could have gone to the bookshop and checked out what the books are like, how much of each skill they're teaching, and so on. Well, I didn't, but I could have. But sometimes it's not about the quality of the class at all. Sometimes there are just certain things that you can't get anywhere except the class, which is kind of my situation right now. I'm learning 2 languages that people might call niche. I don't like how that's becoming my brand. Like, okay, I'm a little bit of a hipster. I'm the kind of person who would go, yeah, that is too mainstream for me. I'm not that hipster. I'm not like, I'm gonna seek out the nichest, smallest languages ever. Well, at least they're both minority languages in their own ways. Some of my friends are also learning so-called low resource languages, where you have to hold on to whatever learning opportunities you get, even if they're not ideal. I'm studying Welsh in England, outside of the country where it's spoken, and spoken as a minority language, I might add. I have very, very little opportunity to get in contact with the language in my daily life, and even online, especially not in an active capacity. So in a way, I just want the class for the routine, for the regular contact, to remind myself to do something every week, perhaps take the course content as a starting point for further self-learning, or use the homework to force myself to do some self-study, so that my brain remembers that this is something that is important to it. And there is no shame in that. I'm taking my final exam of level 1 next week. So again, the course sort of keeps me going. On the flip side, sign languages are languages that by nature need a lot of in-person communication. But in my day-to-day life, I don't interact with anyone who signs. Well, outside of environments that are dedicated to deaf culture and signing, such as the Deaf Centre and my university's BSL Society. So as a person who has little contact with the deaf community, it's not only difficult to find opportunities to use and practice a language, but it's borderline problematic to engage with the language without engaging with the culture. Not to mention, sign language tends to be highly specific to each local community and also changes even faster than spoken languages do. So being in the BSL class, which is obviously taught by a deaf teacher, is a window into this deaf world and my primary channel to contact the community. So depending on what language you're learning, there may or may not be one specific reason that makes it crucial to join a language class, even if other factors and considerations aren't as conclusive. By virtue of being a group, classes always include a variety of students' abilities and levels. Different students are naturally stronger and weaker in different skills. That's just how the brain works. For example, in my Welsh class, I'm ahead in my understanding of the grammar, as I talked about earlier. I'm going to be cheeky and use the impersonal conjugation here because I really love it. I don't think we study it, at least not in the intermediate level. I think that would be really advanced Welsh, but because I've finished reading an entire novel in Welsh, I've actually learned a lot of these fun conjugations that people don't use in their daily lives. And just this week, my class had an extended discussion on Welsh possessive pronouns and verb forms where I completely tuned out. Partly because I was sleep deprived, but also because these are things that I've thought about and read about dozens of times already. My speaking is decent. Not great, but not shabby either, as I've explained in my last video. I have classmates who are actually really quite fluent because they live in an environment where they can use the language in their day-to-day lives, but maybe they don't have enough vocabulary to express themselves in a more complex way. And I also have classmates who read a lot and have honestly amazing vocabulary, but really struggle to speak. So when you start a class with a bunch of people that you don't know, you might end up being the best one. Or conversely, if you're weaker in certain skills, you might have to struggle a bit. And that's a perfectly normal thing for anyone to experience. But from the teacher's perspective, and consequently the students, that also means that the overall progress of the class cannot be too fast or too slow. So whenever the teacher is teaching a specific thing or designing a classroom activity, they have to take into account the people who are still catching up, but also make sure that those who are ahead can still learn new things. When I'm in a class, I would not use words like these because people would have to learn the new words together with me, and it might be like overwhelming for them. So when I'm talking to my classmates, when I'm talking in class, I try to avoid using words that I might have learned elsewhere or might have just looked up, and that is not ideal for my learning. When I'm learning something, when I want to say something, I want to actually use the word and learn it so that I will remember it afterwards. Or when I presented my culture after learning Lithuanian for 1 month, I had to make sure everyone in the class would understand. So I gave myself a challenge to only use words we've learnt in class, no dictionary allowed. I don't think there is any way around this problem. I think that's just an inevitable part of any group class because your abilities to learn different skills are always going to vary. The only possible solution to this problem would be to get tailored individual classes, which is kind of the whole thing we're discussing here. So when you sign up for a class, take that into account. Think about what you're currently good and bad at in the language and go in with the expectation that someone will probably be keeping you from progressing in the things that you're good at. But when it comes to the skills that you're less confident in, you might feel guilty for doing the same. Ultimately, I think one of the deciding factors is money. If you plan to study on your own, unless you already have a friend to practice with, you're better off taking lessons with a private tutor, and those costs can really add up. That's why from my experience, for the same amount of progress you're making in your language, whatever that means, going to a class is usually the more affordable option. So after taking all of these things into consideration, if you prefer a class, great, you also save money. But if you are considering taking a class, but now you think you might be better off with private tutors, you have to decide whether the extra educational value is worth the extra investment. And in some cases, you don't really know until you've done it. Anyway, even if you do take a class, the class is only going to be one part of your learning. You'll still have to be doing other things to supplement your learning, whether it be listening, watching, reading, speaking, you know, the usual stuff. In my Welsh course, for example, which is online, I often find myself unintentionally shadowing what the teacher is saying, with my mic on mute, of course. So after all this, let me know in the comments. Are you taking a class? What do you think you get out of this class? And I'll see you in the next one. Hello, welcome. You're in the outro now. I did a whole series of vlogs in Lithuania documenting my experience doing an intensive Lithuanian course. So if you want to see my thoughts on what I did outside of the classroom to supplement my learning, check out this video. Otherwise, check out this one that YouTube thinks you might like.